Welcome everyone. I'm Angela Love-Zarenka with Lactation Education Resources here with my esteemed colleague, Sakita Lewis-Johnson.
Hello, welcome everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon.
So we're very excited today to be presenting on Real Talk, the realities of being and becoming an IBCLC. So I'm Angela. I have been working in lactation support and care for over 30 years. I started out with the breastfeeding support organization, became board certified a little over 20 years ago, and have worked in a hospital setting, private practice, baby friendly, all the things that most of us can do as lactation consultants. What about you, Sakita?
So, yeah, I started off initially in maternal child health as a nurse, right out of school, out of nursing school. Happy to have bridged the gap and really took professional growth to a whole nother level, became an IBCLC. With that, I've worked in the hospital setting. I've worked doing visits in the community setting. I've also had the same opportunity as Angela. I feel like we mirror each other. I've also had the opportunity to work on a collaborative team for a hospital that eventually did get baby-friendly designation. And I have a private practice. So same thing, same journey, I would say. And I've been a lactation consultant now for about 12 years.
So becoming a lactation consultant, there are over 32,000 IBCLCs in over 120 countries around the world, so you are not alone. Credentialing as a lactation consultant is offered by the International Board of Lactation Consultant Examiners. Now, take a look at their website, which is iblce.org. They have different regional offices depending on where you work and where you reside. So when you review the requirements and the pathways to become eligible to take the IBCLCE exam, to become eligible, so some people will ask, well, what do you need to know? What are the exact things? Because lactation really is quite a large field. So what exactly do you need to know? Well, the detailed content outline or the exam blueprint is based on surveys of IBCLCs in various practice settings around the globe. The outline covers all of the topic areas and the chronological stages an IBCLC needs to know in their work. LER courses cover the entire detailed content outline, and they are approved by LARC. So what is LARC? It is the Lactation Education and Accreditation and Approval Review Committee. So that's the organization that evaluates and approves lactation consultant training courses. So moving on here to the next slide. So you may have some questions that you're asking yourself. And so Sakita, I'm curious, what are some of those questions that you want to ask yourself even before you start some of this journey?
So yeah, that's a great question. And so before we dive in today, the thing that's important, or a couple things to keep in mind and keep it at the forefront of your mind, these few questions is, do I have the skills necessary to become an IBCLC? And if not, where will I acquire these skills? Next slide. So what makes an IBCLC? The thing that I love most about doing this presentation with Angela is that we really come at it from a true, real, holistic, all-encompassing approach on what makes an IBCLC. So first I'm going to start with the most, probably one of the most obvious is competency. It is critically necessary in order to provide adequate and appropriate lactation support. Competency ensures that you have the necessary ability, knowledge, and skill to do something successfully. Next slide. Culturally appropriate. You will hear different words being used, such as culturally relevant. You'll also hear culturally competent. I prefer the word culturally appropriate because I don't believe that you can be competent in someone else's culture, but you can certainly provide culturally appropriate care. And being culturally appropriate starts with cultural humility. And cultural humility is defined as a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique, whereby you, the individual, not only learn about another's cultures, but you start examining your own culture, in your own beliefs and cultural identities. And so one of the things that well, this is the definition from the NIH, and I love this definition because it really just lays it out clear. To be culturally appropriate, you have to examine self first. So oftentimes we'll hear something or someone say things like, well, that's not in their culture. And I just want to say that, although something can be culturally appropriate, when we think about culture as a whole, people are not just a monolith. So what may be appropriate for this person may not be appropriate for the next. And so really keeping self-examination and self-critique of yourselves first will also guide you to provide that culturally appropriate care. Next slide, please. So, are you a credible resource? This is huge. There's been lots of things that have happened since the pandemic hit, from homemade type of breast milk substitutes. But when you're a credible resource, you have to think about everything you say and where did you get your answer from. So, if you're asked a question and you don't know the answer, what do you try to do? Do you try to answer it off a whim based on your lived experience? Or do you know what the evidence says or where to find the evidence so that when you're speaking, you can speak confidently and you're not making up whatever your lived experience is? So keep that in mind. Being a credible resource means that you are able to really give folks the answers that they deserve and need, or say, you know what, let me get back to you, let me check that out, and then go find the resource. Next. So we're already on the next slide. Policy advisor and creator. Really, a policy advisor and creator is all over the place. You could be a policy advisor to legislators, you could be a policy advisor in hospital settings, you could be a policy advisor in the community. One of the things that makes lactation extremely critical is that those who are doing the work and providing lactation care are involved in policy creation of. We typically are the folks that are working with families. We are understanding their needs, and hopefully we are centering their needs to inform us on how to impact policies. So definitely, when you put on your IBCLC hat, these are all the things that encompass what really being an IBCLC is all about. And along with that is being an advocate, which is a person who publicly supports or recommends a particular cause or policy. Usually, almost every IBCLC I know are strong advocates because in this work, that is what's necessary. And I'll keep moving to the problem solver here. So keep in mind when we are talking about individuals and clients, we do often have policies. Keep in mind that when we're looking at specific problems, there's not oftentimes a one size fits all approach. I like to say one size never fits all because we're also individual. And so sometimes what may seem straightforward may not be as straightforward based on a person's individual circumstances. And we have to be willing to understand that you get thrown curveballs, and how do you deal with that? How do you problem solve for this family who may have some different concerns that you may not necessarily have ever been familiar with or heard of? And then along with being a problem solver, sometimes that takes research. So when I say researcher, we have lots of academic researchers in lactation land, and also we have folks that research and look up things so that they can become more knowledgeable on them, or it becomes their, so to speak, expertise, or they become the subject matter expert. So when I say researcher, I don't mean you need to go and get a PhD or anything like that. What I mean is that as you're doing problem solving, are you going to credible resources to get the evidence that you're seeking? So, think about it like this. Researcher, you can be a person who carries out the academic or scientific research, or a person whose job involves discovering and verifying information. Next slide, please. High-level lactation care. High-level lactation care is care that is based on really an acuity model, so to speak. And acuity is the measurement of the type of care a person needs. And so when we think about high-level lactation care, there's so many different lactation professionals, but what's different about the IBCLC is that you are able to problem solve cases. For instance, someone who's on life support, or someone who has been readmitted or to the hospital with mastitis, or if you work in the community, someone who has been diagnosed with mastitis. I'm just trying to, and some of these things you may or may not know what they are, but I'm just trying to give you a level of difference. It's high level lactation care is different than helping with a plain latch, a latch that's easy, and the person may just need a little bit of confidence. High level lactation care involves all of the knowing about the physiology, sometimes the pathology of a condition, to be able to provide appropriate care. And when we talk about skilled care, that goes along with high level lactation care, but we're not just talking about the actual physical care, we're also speaking about skilled in communication. Effective communication is a skill set in itself, and so that's why it's set apart. But when we think about high level lactation care, if you're in that type of setting, you're usually providing care from a collaborative approach, which means effective and being skilled at communication is key, and it goes hand in hand with lactation, high level lactation care. Next slide, please. Essential. We found out during the pandemic, some of us found out how essential we really are, particularly during emergencies, particularly during the pandemic. Lots of things happen in different geographical areas across the world regarding infant feeding. So I won't get into specifics, but what I will say is that human milk sustains life. And in the absence of anything else to be able to feed a lactating person during a pandemic, it should be priority. And again, we learned that. When I say priority and essential, priority means timely. You have to be able to get to someone in a timely manner. Timely meaning you provide the care, the level of care that is necessary at the point that the concern is raised. So sometimes what that looks like is in areas that don't have resourced areas, a lot of rural areas, or even some urban areas may not have access. And that is key to having timely support. Do you even have IBCLCs in that area that could get to someone in a timely manner? And I'm hoping that you're here to really feel that gap, because there's definitely a gap in many areas, and we found that out. Particularly, we know this, but it hits hard during an emergency time. Next slide, please. Collaborative care partner and trusting. A collaborative care partner, you want to remember that you are the lactating family's partner. It is their goals, their fears, barriers, they take precedence over your goals for them. So, there's this thought that we can like share the care. No, it is, we center them, we center their goals, and we assist them with whatever their values, whatever their goals are, and we help to remove barriers if we can. When you work from a place of centering a person and treating them as the expert on their situation, on their problem, you can become trusted, which is really not doing harm, and you're reliable to not do harm. One of the things that I think about being trusted in the community is that when it's something called testimonial justice, where you are saying, yes, I know all this evidence, I know all the recommendations, I know that it's the recommendations are exclusive breastfeeding or human milk for 6 months, but allowing the person to speak to what could be challenging, or even stepping back and just listening, and them saying, well, I know that, but you know what, I want to do it for 3 months. If you're a person that's going to say, well, anyways, well, I think you should do it X, Y, and Z, that's the quickest way to lose trust with an individual, particularly someone, a lactating individual, during the time during postpartum. Next slide, please. So the Institute of Medicine defines patient-centered care as providing care that is respectful of and responsive to individual patient preferences, needs, and values, and ensuring that patient values guide all clinical decisions. I love everything about the person-centered model because it was just what I was speaking about in the previous slide. One of the things about collaboration that's key, even amongst IBCLCs, we talk about multidisciplinary collaboration, but also, oftentimes you may have an IBCLC who works in the community and an IBCLC who works in a hospital setting, who really should be collaborating and doing what we call warm handoffs. How do we make that happen, or is that even happening? Hopefully that will become a model that will be adopted, and it will just be a standard of care. I like to think of it as, when I talk about collaboration in infant feeding, one of the things I say is, when a person is in the hospital and they are going home on oxygen, once they won't leave the hospital unless they know that there will be oxygen there at their home. And I really wish we would start treating infant feeding in that way. So particularly because the pandemic has also shortened the length of stay. So if we can ensure that a person at least have timely access to skilled lactation support, which is if they're having issues, should be an IBCLC, then you know what? That's half the battle. That's ensuring that we are being respectful and responsive to their preference to provide exclusive human milk. Next slide, please. All right, so Angela is going to talk about the pathways. And one of the things I want you to really think about as she go over go over the pathways is to think about what's the market like locally. I talked about rural and urban areas. Do you have more private lactation consultants or IBCLCs who work out in the community, or do you have more hospital lactation consultants? And also, when she's talking about the pathway, she's going to talk about how to get your hours, how to get your education, all of those things. It's so important to understand, how does this fit into my life? Like, I'm going to get this extra education. I need all of these hours, but I work a 40-hour job. Is this realistic? Is this feasible? How can I do this? The other part to think about is which pathway is applicable to your situation. Uh, when she discusses the pathways, it's very important to key into where you fit and which pathway is most appropriate for you. Other things, when I say look at the local market, you want to make sure also that there's mentorship. Do you have a network of folks that you can start to grow and learn from, and also bounce things off of as you're learning? And also private practice. If there are folks that have lots of private practice, some folks only do private practice. Can you make a living off of private practice and what's being charged in your area? These are all things that I want you to really consider when you are thinking about this pathway and this journey, because it's the reality of the things that we all have to consider on this journey. And I'm going to kick it back over to Angela so she can take the dive in. So everybody buckle up, because here she goes.
So true, Sakita, so true. Okay, good. So the roadmap to becoming an IBCLC, these are the things that we're going to talk about in our presentation today. And it can feel a little bit complicated, but I'm going to break it down and give you a nice roadmap. Okay, the first thing you need to do is choose a pathway. Now we're going to come back to this in just a minute. Each one of these pathways has 3 different components. The first one is education. The second one is clinical hours. And the third one is exam prep. So the first component is the health sciences education. So what that includes is it's typical education for the healthcare provider. So there are 8 post-secondary or university level courses and 6 general education subjects. You can find the full list of each of these 14 subjects on the IBLCE website. Now you can search for that online if you'd like to, or you can find the link in the resource document that is attached to this video. So the 8 university level courses are, and you don't need to write these down now, so it's okay: biology, anatomy, physiology, infant and child growth and development, introduction to clinical research, nutrition, psychology or counseling skills, or communication skills, and finally sociology or cultural sensitivity or cultural anthropology. So they can be online or in person, as long as the institution is accredited to provide the learning. So if you took any of these courses during your college career, they count, even if it was 20 years ago. Now, if you still need those courses though, LER does partner with Walden University to provide those basic courses. The advantage of working with Walden is that they're online, they've been chosen by us, and you can apply for financial aid if you're in the United States. The 6 general education subjects are medical documentation, medical terminology, occupational safety and security for health professionals, professional ethics for health professionals, universal safety precautions and infection control, and basic life support. 5 of the 6 general education courses can be taken through LER. The only one you're going to need to search online for is basic life support. Now, in many countries, that includes an in-person skills check for the training. Now, I have heard of some of the organizations offering all of the training completely online. So you want to make sure that you check with your local resources. In the resources section, there is a link to the Health Sciences Education Guide, as well as the college courses that you need. Or excuse me, the post-secondary courses, post-secondary education courses that you need. Now, the guide provides you with a general description of a typical course in each of these subject areas. So please keep in mind that IBLCE is international. The names used in their document to describe the courses may not exactly fit the description of the course at your accredited educational institution, and that's okay. IBCLC utilizes broad terms with the understanding that there is no universal description for what a course, say, in clinical research will cover. Why are these 14 courses required? Well, as Sakita pointed out earlier, the IBCLC is a standalone credential, meaning you don't need another certification, degree, or license to practice as an IBCLC. Once you pass the exam, you will be an allied healthcare professional. The courses will help you to be prepared for your career as well as help you to pass the IBCLC exam. The second thing you need to do is to find a place to get your lactation-specific education. So this is where we've got you covered. The education needs to be comprehensive and cover the IBCLC detailed content outline. So IBCLC requires at least 90 hours of lactation-specific education and 5 hours on communication skills. Our 5-hour course is specific to lactation and breastfeeding care to help you in your practice as a lactation consultant. So the third component is lactation-specific clinical experience. So this can include in-person consultations, telephone consultations, or online breastfeeding and lactation care that supports breastfeeding families. Also includes lactation assistance to pregnant and breastfeeding clients and lactation education to families and/or professionals. So these hours are to be obtained within the 5 years immediately prior to applying for the exam. So now, how many of those hours do you need? Well, that depends on which pathway you choose. So, as I mentioned, the amount of clinical experience required to sit the exam depends on which pathway, right? So the hours you need, they'll also need to be accrued in the 5 years prior to applying for the exam. And so the quick overview is here on this slide. So I'm going to review each one in a little bit more detail. So pathway 1 is for healthcare professionals and healthcare professionals and those who provide breastfeeding support through an IBCLCE recognized breastfeeding support counselor organization. Healthcare professionals include physicians, midwives, nurses, dietitians, physical therapists or physiotherapists, speech pathologists, and others. Breastfeeding support counselors include those accredited through organizations such as Lactation League International, the Australian Breastfeeding Association, the Breastfeeding Mothers Support Group in Singapore, among many others. As of today, there are over 40 organizations that have applied to IBCLCE and are approved. You can find an updated list on the IBCLCE website. So now pathway 2 applicants must complete a comprehensive academic program in human lactation and breastfeeding through an accredited university program. Their education has both the didactic and the clinical components, and they require 300 clinical supervised hours working with breastfeeding families. As of today, there's only 7 of them, and they're all located in the United States, but LARC is expanding the program as fast as they possibly can. I'm not going to go too much into depth into pathway 2. Pathway 3 is a structured mentorship program between an IBCLC and the applicant. The IBCLC, or if there's more than one, IBCLCs, must be in good standing with IBCLCE. Those who choose this pathway must have their program pre-approved by IBCLCE prior to collecting their clinical hours. Now, I understand that those applications are turning around relatively quickly right now, usually within a few weeks. A quick note, for those of you who have breastfed, chest-fed, or provided human milk for your child, the hours you spent nursing, pumping, and helping your friends sadly doesn't count towards your clinical hours. Now, while 500 or 1,000 hours seems like a lot, there's a really good reason why. Each candidate needs to have the clinical experience so they can provide competent care as an IBCLC. If it's any consolation, the number of clinical hours used to be a lot more. I've known IBCLCs who needed anywhere from 2,500 to 8,000 clinical hours just before they sit the exam. So here we go, talking a little bit more about clinical hours in pathway 1. So those who apply through this pathway need the 1,000 hours. For that candidate who's also a healthcare provider, the hours can be done in a hospital, birth center, clinic, lactation care clinic or practice, a primary care practitioner's clinic or practice, or through independent practice as a licensed or registered healthcare professional in a non-healthcare setting. So you may be asking yourself, well, who's a healthcare provider according to IBCLCE? Go to our resource page and take a look at the click through to the link to the IBCLCE website, and they have a list on their website. For breastfeeding support counselors from an IBCLCE recognized organization, their hours can be earned in person or online. The location and type of support depends on the criteria provided by the recognized organization. Hours earned before 1 January of 2022 are counted at a flat rate. For in-person care, 500 hours per 12 months. For telephone or online care, it's 250 hours per 12 months. After January 1st of 2022, the hours will be counted on an hour-by-hour basis. So now 2 important points about these clinical hours. 1, it's important for you to document them as you accrue them. Be very detailed in case IBCLC chooses to audit your application before you take the exam. They may want to see your documentation, such as any sort of spreadsheet that you've created or other documentation where you counted your hours. And the second thing to remember about these clinical hours is that these 1,000 hours do not need to be directly supervised. Okay, so skipping over to pathway 3, that requires 500 hours of clinical experience, and this must be directly supervised by an IBCLC in good standing. It's best done in a busy practice setting where you can work with many breastfeeding, chest feeding people, and those providing human milk to their babies each day, such as a hospital or clinic setting. Now, there is an application for this pathway. It must be planned and approved by IBCLC before you embark on your program. The hours count towards the 500 when you're actually working with families. So the observation hours that you need beforehand don't count towards those hours. Now remember that clinical experience is graduated. That is, it starts with some observation and then doing a few tasks under supervision, then completing these tasks independently with the IBCLC nearby to ask questions and discuss situations. So I recently had a conversation with Amy Black, who is our clinical internship director, and we agree that most people spend approximately 75 hours in orientation before you and the IBCLC feel comfortable with you having worked more independently and begin to accrue those 500 hours. So take a look at in your community to find a willing internship site or mentors. You may need to reach out to many people to find someone with the time, experience, and capacity to agree to be your mentor. It is important to find a good fit. Talk to others who've been through pathway 3 to find successful strategies with finding a good mentor. If you're interested in this pathway, go to the IBCLC website and download the Pathway 3 Plan Guide. Find a mentor, complete the application, and submit it to the IBCLC. While they must approve your plan before you begin to accrue hours, you can start your observation while IBCLC is reviewing your application. LER has an internship program with sites around the United States. You can reach out to our internship director to find out more information. While this pathway has an added step or two, it's worth it. Well, why? Well, IBCLC, they report on their test data after the exam is done. And the data shows us that the people who go through pathway 3 usually score the best on the exam. I really do think that it's this mentorship that's that key component. Learning from an experienced clinician is well worth the extra effort at the beginning of this pathway. So now, clinical hours during telehealth. This is something which is a caveat now during the pandemic COVID-19. The quick answer as to whether or not you can accrue those clinical hours is yes. Now, I'm going to actually read to you some information from the longer answer, which is paraphrased from the IBCLC documents. In part, they say, during the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, IBCLC published specific guidelines about attaining clinical hours when face-to-face interactions were curtailed to reduce the spread of COVID-19. The document dated 17 April and 6 October of 2020 state, they provide information on how clinical eligibility requirements could be met by leveraging technology. IBCLC will allow the use of technology if certain parameters are met and allowed by your practice setting and by the IBCLC guiding practice documents such as the scope of practice, the code of professional conduct, and the clinical competencies for the practice of IBCLCs. The key provisions include attention to privacy, security, assessment, demonstration, and evaluation of relevant techniques, provision of evidence-based information to clients, as well as appropriate collaboration with or referral to other healthcare providers. Particularly emphasizes Principle 3.2 of the Code of Professional Conduct, which requires advance written consent from the breastfeeding parent prior to photographing, recording, or taping, audio or video, that parent or child. Another important point about the use of technology for Pathway 3 interns is that there should be, quote, observation using technology with two-way synchronous audio and visual components, the focus on the mentor providing mentoring and guidance to the applicant. And candidates in Pathway 3 mentorship programs may earn 100% of their minimum of 500 hours of directly supervised lactation-specific clinical practice through technology platforms. So this guidance is through 30 September of 2021. I would say take a look at the IBCLC webpage in order to determine whether that's going to be extended. I know IBCLC actually has to apply for this sort of exemption 2, requiring that in-person piece. And so IBCLC has to apply to their organization. So do keep an eye on the IBCLC website, or actually keep an eye with LER, because we actually do keep our eyes on the IBCLC website in order to find information which could be relevant to you. So at LER, there are two ways to gather your lactation-specific education. One is called the Lactation Consultant Training Program, or LCTP, and it is the 90 hours front to back. The other is the Core and Bridge Program. They are designed to meet your educational needs depending on your background and your previous lactation training. So first, we have a comprehensive program called our Lactation Consultant Training Program. The LCTP is a 90+ hour course which is eligible for CERPs, CME, nursing contact hours, and CEs from the American College of Nurse Midwives. It is intended for those who do not have any lactation education and know they want to be an IBCLC. As mentioned before, it covers all topics on the IBCLCE detailed content outline. We have more than 35 knowledgeable, experienced instructors who are practicing lactation consultants, researchers, authors who teach in our courses, including me and Sakita. Our classes are economical. You can view them on a variety of devices such as your computer, tablet, or phone. They are optimized for a computer, but they can be reviewed later when you're on the go. Using an online platform, there's no travel to another city, there's no hotel expenses, leaving your family for a week, or taking time off from work. Furthermore, our online course is convenient. You can study at home at any time that works for you. You can study at your own pace, even go back and review something you didn't catch the first time through. Not everything is crammed into a short period of time in an overwhelming intensive study. Now, we used to do it. We used to do it the other way. We used to do on-site training courses for over 15 years. Students left the program dazed with too much information condensed into such a short period. We think that spreading out the classes helps with comprehension and retention of the information. Work on the modules whenever you have a small window of time available, and you can integrate the information into your practice as you go. Do you have a question for the instructor or want to discuss a concept with your fellow students? There are several ways to connect and get the answers you need. We have a very active Facebook group for those who are in the 90-hour course, the Core or Bridge course, or our exam review, where our students can meet and support each other along the way. There are people who are IBCLCs in the group, and they can also support your journey. You can email us at support@lactationtraining.com, and we have people who keep an eye on that email address and keep an eye on those questions 7 days a week. Upon the completion of our 90-hour course, you are eligible to take the Certified Breastfeeding Specialist exam. The exam is included in the price. Once you pass, you're a Certified Breastfeeding Specialist. This is to recognize you for the level of education you have obtained. With this certification, you can begin to collect your clinical hours towards the IBCLCE exam. So the Lactation Consultant Training Program is the full 90-hour course. But let's say that you're not sure where you want to start, or let's say you have some lactation-specific education hours already. So then we either have our core course or our bridge course. So they have the same advantages as the Lactation Consultant Training Program. They're self-paced, online, taught by the same wonderful instructors. Our customer support team is available 7 days a week, and people who register for these courses are able to join our Facebook group. They were created for people who are working towards their IBCLC. So our initial course is called the Core because it provides you with the core lactation education you need to understand what it means to begin supporting the normal course of breastfeeding. It's 54 hours of online education. It covers the basics such as anatomy and physiology, infant growth and development, supporting the preterm baby, medications and breastfeeding, and many more topics. At the end of the course is a certified breastfeeding specialist exam. Once you successfully complete the exam, you are a certified breastfeeding specialist and can begin to collect your hours towards the IBCLC exam in the appropriate setting. The Bridge course is ideal for people who have the basic lactation education components and need an additional 45 hours to qualify for the IBCLC exam. Topics in our Bridge course include legal and ethical concerns for the lactation consultant, infant feeding and disasters, breastfeeding the infant with medical challenges, case studies, and clinical skills videos. So if you're not sure where to start, if you're new to the profession, I would suggest the core course. Get your feet wet to see if becoming an IBCLC fuels your passion. So why should you choose us? Well, we're online and you can do it in your own time. Our 35 instructors have real-world experience, and we are here to support you on your journey. As a matter of fact, we have several members of our customer support team that are IBCLCs. They get it. They know the journey, and they want to support you. You can get your content questions answered by those experts in the field. Last week, for example, someone reached out to one of our instructors with a question from her own practice. We made the connection, and the former student received the answer to help her client. Another student had a question about creating a policy at their hospital, and we found the appropriate instructor to answer the question and provide additional resources. Okay, great. So here's our email address, support@lactationtraining.com. What questions do you have for us today? I will open it up, and I know Julie is there. I'm sure she's answered a bunch of the questions online, but let's see if there's any that we can answer for everybody. Okay, so some of the questions that people are asking include someone who's already who's working in lactation support and they've already got the first 45 hours. Yes, the answer is that our Bridge program is perfect for you. Our Facebook support group that's a really good question. I believe it's IBLCE. I think it's the IBLCE study group. Exam study group is what it's called, but it is something which does require membership, and so you have to purchase one of our courses, and then you can ask if you can be added to that Facebook group. Sakita, do you see any questions there that you wanted to tackle?
No, as I was looking at the questions, it seems like Julie has really done a fantastic job at filtering and answering them.
Which is fantastic. Yes, that's true. Thank you so much, Julie. You're amazing.
Yes.
So somebody did ask whether or not you can get an actual degree in lactation care through Pathway 2, and the answer is yes, you can. So for those of you who would also like to get, finish up or actually get your college degree, it's a wonderful thing that you can actually go to college and become a lactation consultant. And so those are sort of all-encompassing courses. So they've got the didactic that you need. They also have the clinical hours. They've got those settings. And so by all means, do take a look at those if you also want to dovetail that into getting your undergraduate degree.
There is a question, Angela, that says, what if someone's already a registered nurse or dietitian? I am not, I'm going to assume that they may be talking about which pathway is applicable, but that is a question that has been flagged.
Right. So I do see if you're already a registered nurse or dietitian, then indeed, Pathway 1, you can, if you're currently working in that setting, you can actually practice under Pathway 1. Now, the thing with Pathway 1 is that you have to document your hours. So you need 1,000 hours, and it's 1,000 hours working specifically with breastfeeding families, chest feeding families, or those providing human milk for their baby. And so it's not that you can just do your hours as an RN, let's say, in an oncology unit in order to collect those for the IBCLC exam. They have to be specifically with those dyads or with those families. And so that's the important thing to be mindful of there.
Thank you, Angela. There's also another question that asks, is it better to set up your internship with mentors before starting the lactation classes or after? I'm going to say it's better to really start networking and start your classes. The networking and relationship building is going to be a part of it, and then establishing your mentorship relationship, meaning this person will work and help you towards gaining your clinical hours. And so I see it as a both and, but not so clear cut. There's going to be gray areas, but you should, if you're really serious about this work, the thing would be is to really start to consider, do you have mentors in your area? You know, and what does that look like? And do you have a relationship? So I
Well, and
hope
that's
that
really
answers the
important.
question.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I want to dovetail for another question. Somebody asks, if you start on one pathway, let's say you start pathway 3, and then you decide, let's say you are one of the recognized healthcare professionals, or you become affiliated or accredited by one of the breastfeeding support organizations, can you switch to pathway 1? And so IBCLC wants you to follow through with that. And the question had to do with whether or not your mentor can finish those hours. And so that's something that you really need to discuss at the outset and really be transparent with them, and hopefully they'll be transparent with you. If they have never mentored someone before, we actually have a course for people who are mentors for our internship program called Mentoring the Next Generation. And I do encourage IBCLCs to mentor the next generation, that we need more out there serving in communities. And so by all means do. And if, you know, if they want to take that class, you know, maybe suggesting it and suggesting that they come to LER and take that course will help them to feel a little bit more comfortable and confident that they're not the only thing that the person needs to know. They're not the only resource that that person has. And so, yes, you don't need to just have one mentor, you can have many. There was a wonderful certified breastfeeding specialist who's now an IBCLC, and she had multiple mentors. And the reason why is because she was active duty military in the US Armed Forces. And so she moved around, and she actually did need more than one mentor.
There's a following up with that. I just want to answer this question. It says, do you have recommendations on how to approach IBCLCs for mentorship? My first recommendation would be to become involved with your local breastfeeding coalitions, if there are any. You know, that is a challenge. And the other thing I would say is, you know, social media can be a wonderful thing with regards to networking and even defining what does mentorship look like. If you're talking about clinical hours, that's one thing, but if you're talking about someone that you can bounce ideas off of or just talk to, that person may not need to be in the back of your woods. So my advice to how to approach would be to really put yourself in positions and networks so that you can you build a relationship to be able to approach someone to, you know, mentor you. And so that's the route that I would go.
I agree.
Angela?
And to that point, you know, someone asked whether or not it's better to set up your internship with your mentors before or after starting your lactation classes. And that's a little bit of a catch-22, just because if you don't know whether or not you're going to like, you know, breastfeeding support and learning more about it, then I would say start your courses first. But if you feel that, you know, oh, you're so passionate and oh my goodness, I just want to do this thing, then start finding your mentors. And some mentors may have a requirement that you do need to complete either the core course or even, you know, more than that, or be, you know, let's say 3/4 of the way through your 90 hours before you can start working with them. And one of the reasons why is because they want to make sure that the information that you're providing is evidence informed. And so indeed, it just depends upon the mentor or the mentors that you have as far as whether or not they're able to do that. Let's see. Another question is, someone is an RN, not working OB or postpartum. that you are still pathway 1, yes, but you need to get the 1,000 hours. So you'll need to find a way to get the 1,000 hours working in the setting where you're working with breastfeeding, chest feeding families, or those providing human milk for their babies. And so you will need to find some sort of a practice setting. LER can support that. Go ahead.
Angela, can I comment?
Please. Hi, Julie.
Sure. So what the person was asking is if they could take our internship program. So just to know, if you do an internship, that then is pathway 3. But you can still use your RN license to cover the 14 health sciences. So yes, you would be following pathway 3, and if you don't already work with lactation, that will probably be a faster route for you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. So another question, let's see. Oh, you answered that already as far as how do you recommend approaching IBCLCs for mentorship. Did you cover that one, Sakita? No, did you?
I did. I think in summary, I just, think it's important to establish a relationship first. Doing some homework, some networking, finding out who's in your neck of the woods and building those relationships before approaching, but also thinking about mentorship in a holistic way, not just I need clinical hours, but I also need advice. I need different areas that I may need to learn about specifics about, for instance, what can I say, relactation or induced lactation. Where do you go for that? That sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And so that's one of the nice things about it. I would also suggest if you are, let's say you don't have a local coalition or it's not currently meeting, one thing to do is to, when you're reaching out to those IBCLCs, tell them how you can help them. In other words, let's say that you're a whiz at social media and that you've got your game down. Well, let them know, hey, I see that, I'd be more than happy to help you with your social media, in exchange for the mentorship. Or the thing I love about having interns is that they can help me as far as my caseload is concerned. So when I was working in a hospital, it was really nice to have my interns to pitch to so that I could say, hey, listen, the person in this room just needs a latch check. Can you please go take care of that? Or, hey, the person over here needs a pump set up. Can you please go take care of that? Then I could deal with some of the more complex issues that require the attention of an IBCLC. And so it really did help with my workload whenever I had mentors. So maybe that's one little way of enticing the potential IBCLC to take you on as a mentor. So someone asked, you say the cost of the exam was included in the price of the 90-hour course. So our certified breastfeeding specialist exam is included in the price of the 90-hour course. But the IBLCE exam is a whole separate application as well as fee. So someone is asking, is pathway 3 an option for a stay-at-home mom with only a few credits taken over 10 years ago? Absolutely, yes. That is definitely for you. Even if you took your classes 20 years ago, those post-secondary courses 20 years ago, it's not a problem at all. So indeed, you can count all of those hours. The only ones that need to be done in the 5 years prior to taking the exam are your clinical hours, as well as your lactation-specific education. So the didactic, lactation-specific, and the clinical hours, that's what needs to be done in the 5 years prior. Okay, great. What type of work can be done with the certified lactation course? So again, that goes into that market analysis. So if you want to be a CBS and work in your community, take a look in your community to find out what sort of opportunities are there for a certified breastfeeding specialist. And if you are in a community where they do have, and there are opportunities for people who have that initial 45 hours of basic breastfeeding education, that didactic, then the CBS is equivalent to that. And so I would highly recommend that you reach out to those programs and organizations and say, hey, I really want to become a CBS. I'm sincerely hoping that you can hire me, and tell them why. Tell them why you would be someone who would be a good fit for their program. So there are a lot of things that you can do as a certified breastfeeding specialist, but do your homework first just to make sure. Okay, well, I'm looking at the questions and I think that's it. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us at support@lactationtraining.com. Again, I'm Angela Love-Zarenka with my colleague Sakita Lewis-Johnson. Thank you so much for joining us today. I sincerely hope that you are able to meet your goal of supporting breastfeeding, chest feeding, and families who are providing human milk for their babies. We are here to support you throughout your journey. We need more lactation consultants out in this world. So thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.